Have you used an executive coach, and do you believe in executive coaching?
I absolutely believe in executive coaching. I have only worked with one, and I've worked with him actually for the last 7, 8, 9 years from the very beginning when my company could afford it, when Nasty Gal could afford it. He was a big expense, nowhere near the expense I'm about to take on with Dave Cashin, who Jesse so generously introduced me to, who's the coach I'm going to have my first call with in the next couple weeks. But what I got out of him, um, the executive coach I've had is very like has leads with heart, but for the most part has led with advice on how to manage people, how to think about, when I was putting together my thesis for what was really going to serve me after I left Girl Boss, my second company, thinking about, I've talked about this before, business class feels like a project because we launch it twice a year. It's not something that's on every day where there's just this like onslaught of stuff. And, with Girl Boss, we were doing brand deals, we were hosting conferences. There was such a like human capital lift. And so he helped me clarify that I wanted to do things that felt more like projects and less like an undertow of business. When I had issues with executives, or with management, for example, like my nature is to like run to the fire and fix things. I'm not avoidant. Like it's a problem. I'm actually very reactive, and it shows up in all areas of my life. It can work in business. It can also be really bad in relationships. And he taught me, so this is like one of the most interesting things he ever taught me, is that there's a really healthy amount of avoidance that a leader needs to have to redirect people to solve their own problems instead of allow your team to come to you, ask you what you think about it or how you should solve the problem, and deputize them to come back with an answer, which I'd never thought before that avoidance could be a healthy thing. He was a lot more practical of a coach. Dave is like a heart led guy. He's used the word love on our call, and we'll see how much I can love. And I think it's going to help me like love myself and, whatever, hopefully more therapist it's not that different from a therapist, except therapists don't have the understanding of what leadership really looks like often in a way that consumes our lives as much as our time with our families or our friends and the other things we might go to a therapist about, but they can't speak to at all.
Yeah. Jesse, what's your experience been?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've told you guys about this story, but I'll share it just for everyone's benefit. Um, uh, I started Ampush when I was 25, and we grew the business super hard, super aggressive, bootstrapped it to 30 million in revenue in 4 or 5 years, and killed ourselves doing. I mean, it was rough, and killed other people too. Like if you go to all the while having good intentions, let's say. There's a time where like just it's still on Glassdoor. People just rip me to shreds. I'm sure same as you guys have had similar experiences. And then we sort of had, I'm sure. I don't blame, like I like when I look back on it, I go, oh yeah, okay, I see how I created that, right? And we had this kind of like exit, and we sold a big chunk of the company, had the success check mark, quote unquote. And then I had this period after my daughter was born where I just felt totally like didn't want to go to work for probably 6 months. Like would wake up, cancel my schedule, go in at 11, hang out, leave, just didn't want to be there anymore. Started kind of like, oh, why am I doing marketing, advertise? Like I just questioning everything, like just felt rudderless.
And it
And
makes
actually
sense,
talking,
by the way. It makes sense because your whole life up until that point, from the youngest age, you said literally you were known as the guy who was going to be an entrepreneur
totally.
in high school. Like this was your identity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had gotten it. And then I was like, I clearly, and so Rick Elias, the founders of Red Venture, he literally was like, Jesse, you're the luckiest MFer in the world. Like you have beautiful kids, you've done really well, you do what you want, and yet you don't, like there's some inner work to be done. And that was like, okay, this guy, I was like, I'll do some inner work. And I started talking to a coach, Dave, and we ran a process, by the way. Like I think this is an important part of selecting a coach because Sophia mentioned it. We met with probably 5 or 6, and it quickly emerged to us. We sort of called it like, again, another 2 by 2, right? There's on one end of the spectrum is like, are they a business consultant, or are they like a spirit, or let's say spiritual coach for you as a person, or a business consultant? Like, are they gonna tell you to reorg or how to give feedback or advice, right? And then like the other part of it was how experienced, like how much were they a professional coach versus an entrepreneur, somebody who had been in our world, being a coach. And we wanted someone in that top right who was more spiritual, like a little bit we didn't want someone to teach us how to reorg or run our DCF or whatever. And we also wanted someone who had been in our shoes, and Dave kind of fit that bill perfectly. And that was how we thought about the coaching choice. And I think, by the way, I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think it's different depending on where you are in the journey. And we met with him, and he sort of presented this framework of motivation to us, which comes from the Conscious Leadership Group. And he said, you've used fear to motivate yourselves. And I was like, no, I haven't. I'm happy. I'm good. And that's how I felt. And then he kind of like laid it out, and I was like, oh, you're right.
Yeah,
like
it's
shown up everywhere. Like it's shown up everywhere as a thing for us to motivate.
What does that actually look like in practice, leading by fear?
Yeah, I mean, the framework is like there's 5 types of motivators. There's fear, there's extrinsic, there's intrinsic, there's play genius, and then there's like empathic love, right? And fear could be anything from like I don't think I'm much highly of myself, so I have to prove that I'm a certain way, right? Or it could just be like in my case, it was I don't think I'll be successful. Like I wanted to be successful so badly, and I didn't think I would be, and so I would just use that gap to constantly motivate myself. And there's examples of like one of my favorite ones I always share is like Bill Gates, and I don't know if this is true or not, but this is a theory, is like very fear motivated, right? Sent a coffin of Lotus software to Lotus after he crushed them with Excel. Was just notoriously that intense guy. Became the richest man in the world. And this is the challenge with fear. Fear is very effective, right? You put a gun to my head, I'll run faster than I've ever run. But then as soon as the gun's gone, I stop running, right? And in his case, he became the richest man in the world, and Microsoft didn't sustain his motivation. Then he went all the way to like the love of helping people, which is like, I'm going to go cure polio, right? And that's the other flip of it. And so a lot of the work that I've done with Dave, and is how do I shift from using fear and extrinsic motivators to these like more pure, sort of more sustainable motivators? Because fear leaves a negative residue on people around you, like the people who wrote Glassdoor things about me, that this guy is a jerk and whatever, right? And then it runs out. And mine had run out after having that successful check mark, and I didn't have anything else to latch onto. And so a lot of the work was what actually gets me motivated beyond money, beyond success. And for me, it was just transformative. And there's a bunch of other ways. EQ, it made me a better husband. Like there's so many places that it's shown up for me.
Well,
I also believe that what shows up in your business life as a leader is a direct parallel to what shows up in your personal life. And it's a
100%.
More amplified kind of example with sometimes what feels like higher stakes to kind of weed through, and the consequences. It's so many more people and money and things that are a lot more tangible as consequences of the things that you haven't solved or worked through. For me, reactivity, right, can work when I'm operating independently. It doesn't work in a relationship. Reactivity doesn't work if I'm in a conversation with my team and I want to correct something or someone. Taking a pause and being thoughtful, simple thing. Most people understand this, and a lot of all of us have small things that it seems like other people just innately understand. But it's that kind of stuff that even talking to a leadership coach about business allows you to be a better person with your friends and your family.
And you're the same person.
Partners.
I mean, that's the weird thing is like, it's so obvious when I say it is, why would they not be related? And why would you not be the same thing? Because you're just one person. It's not like you can really be. And by the way, my version of that reactivity for you, Sophia, was also one for me, but empathy. Like I had I was raised in a household where if you were doing something right, nobody said anything. And if you were messing up, you heard about it. That was it. And so the idea of like appreciation and gratitude didn't really exist.
Yeah.
And in a nice way, like if I ever said thank you to my parents, you don't have to say thank you, right? That's how their worldview was. But all of a sudden in both my marriage and my work, people were like, dude, you're thankless. Like all you do is ask people to do stuff, and you're never empathetic. You're not aware of their feelings or emotions. And I really wasn't. And by the way, I'm still like probably at like a second grade level of life of empathy, of truly understanding another person and trying to walk in their shoes and what they're feeling and what it feels like. And so there's so many things to develop, and a coach holds up a mirror to you and shows you things. Just a small example I do with a lot of entrepreneurs because it immediately clicks is one of the first things Dave noticed about me and my co-founder Nick was you guys use the word should a lot. And I'm like, huh, what do you mean? Why does that matter? He's like, well, like, is should an inspiring word? When you say we should do a reorg, we should grow revenue 50%. Like, and then I realized in my marriage, it was like, we should go to this party this weekend. And by the way, should is such an arguable state. Like, no, we shouldn't. And then you start debating it. And both in work and at home, I started using the phrase I'd like, or I'd prefer. I'd like to do a reorg. I think, or how amazing would it be if X? And that little language shift, by the way, there's words like need, must, have to, should. All of them seem to drain energy from me, at least, and also feel like it's another way of, in a mini way, putting myself as like, I'm not where I'm supposed to be. I need to be better. I'm fear. I have fear to get to where I need to be. And like that little thing was just so transformative for me. And I don't know how who would have shown me that if not Dave, like telling me like, hey, dude, this word, I just noticed you use this word a lot, right? So that's a cool tactical example of her. Alex, what's your experience?
Yeah, Alex.
Yeah.
We're recruiting you now. We are enrolling you in executive coach. I'm pretty sure.
First of all, Dave sounds amazing, and I may need to try out Dave, get on the Dave payroll. I started executive coaching late. Like, I started working with my executive coach right after we sold Morning Brew in October of 2020. And first of all, what I'll say, I heard it from both of you guys, and I think it's such an important point for any entrepreneur who wants to work with a coach, is that coaches have specialties. I didn't think about it in as clean of a way as Jesse did with kind of his 2x2 on like spiritual guru versus business consultant, but it is such an important point. And what I would just say is, when you think about who's the coach that you should work with, I think, first of all, you should pick your coach in the same way that you pick a partner in life or an employee. There's a recruiting process, and you shouldn't just say yes to the first person you're introduced to because you have no reference point. And odds are that the first person you talk to is not going to be the right person. The second thing is understanding what are like the acute challenges or you're trying to overcome, I think is so important. So for me, what I was trying to work on after we sold the Brew, and then in April of 2021, I moved out of the CEO role, is there were a few very clear things. One is I was planning to sell kind of a second chunk of my equity back to the owner of our business, and I needed help in kind of the navigating that experience, how to negotiate, the right way to have that conversation, because it's something I had never done before. So I would say that was like on the business side. On the personal side, I was incredibly lost after moving out of the CEO role. Very similar to what Jesse said about kind of this loss of motivation and this loss of identity and questioning, what he should do. That was literally me to a T. I think what happened was I went from spending, let's call it 80 hours a week to 30 hours a week on Morning Brew when I moved into the chairman role. And all of my thoughts, and your thoughts end up becoming what you say, and what you say becomes who you are. All of my thoughts ended up becoming like self-hating or confused. Mm-hmm. So as one, like, how am I going to find fulfillment for the rest of my life? And just asking that question became so lofty. It felt like an insurmountable question to answer. And the second, honestly, like, I lost self-love. I was the most self-conscious that I've been, I think, in my entire life. I was saying, clearly I messed up as the CEO because I'm no longer the CEO of the company. Clearly I didn't do a good job. And so then the question started bleeding in of, should I start another company so I can prove that I can run a business at this stage? Clearly this proved that I'm not a good operator. Clearly this proved that I'm not analytical. Clearly this proved that I'm not strategic and forward looking, and that I'm a procrastinator. Like, that was the flurry of thoughts. And I would say what Ryan, who he has this amazing balance of kind of the business and analytical side, but also deep knowledge and spirituality, mostly steeped in Eastern, but has spent more time focusing on Western. And so for me, the things we spoke about was negotiating the sale of my equity, process moving into the chairman role, and with that, having love, like learning to be excited about the things that I'm really good at, which it was such a hard thing for me because the world was celebrating me as this young media entrepreneur, but it is not at all, going back to what Jesse was saying about the mirror and seeing your reflection. I couldn't have seen a more skewed reflection in the mirror. And then, we talked about also like my relationship with my co-founder, because Austin and I were so young when we started the business. I think I shared this with you guys a few conversations ago. We never had level setting conversations. And I think Austin, similar to you, Jesse, he operates at a speed where you talk about the things that need to be fixed, but you never talk about the things that are going well. And so like I had never received a compliment from Austin in 7 years of running business together. And what I realized about myself, probably because of experiences earlier in life, is that I need a little bit more of that validation to give me something directionally that I know that I'm confident. And so I found it largely helpful. But what I'll also say is it's okay to then at a point feel like you're no longer getting all of the benefit out of your coach anymore and to stop working with them. Like it also doesn't have to be, in my opinion, a lifelong commitment. It's okay to challenge the status quo when you feel like you've plateaued in the benefit you're getting.
I told my therapist yesterday what got me here won't get me there, specifically in relationship to my work with her, and that I need to work with someone who's more active, not necessarily tells me what to do, but she's a traditional psychotherapist and she kind of sits back and I have to come to my own conclusions. And that is like such a slow process. And it's been great for me for several years. And have told her like I have specific things that I want to work through, and I don't know if that's something that I can do with you. And I think realizing that even you can be really loyal to, a coach who feels like an emotional relationship, but it's still a professional relationship. One more thing I'll say is it's a write-off. You can't write off therapy. So
Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of The Crazy Ones. If you're an entrepreneur or a builder and want more great startup content, make sure to subscribe on our YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts.